Welcome, everybody, to NetApp On Air. My name is Nick Howell. Thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate you guys being here. We're excited to have you here for this special edition today of NetApp On Air. Unless you were living under a rock for this morning, yes, we did a pretty massive announcement this morning regarding some of our new storage systems that we're going to be that we've unveiled. And I thought it apropos to bring on several of the people behind that launch. And the group of us are going to geek out. We're going to go over all of the systems. We're going to go over all of the announcements. And we're going to let everybody in on what's going on and what the good news is. But first, shout out to everybody over in Discord. Want to say hi. I see you guys over there watching with us. If you guys haven't joined Discord yet, be sure to jump in there. You can find links to that in the description if you're on YouTube, but we'll throw it up. It'll be mentioned throughout the show several times. Discord.gg/NetApp if you haven't found your way yet. Make sure you're subscribed here to YouTube or following us on Twitch, and come join us in Discord for all kinds of fun activities and chats. All of my guests today will be joining us, or are active members in Discord, I should say. So they will be around for questions, for follow-ups, for all kinds of good stuff. But follow us everywhere. You can go check out my video that I put up this morning giving my take on the launch over on the Data Center Dude YouTube channel. But absolutely, come join us in Discord because that is the place to be. You can find the landing page over at netappdiscord.com for all of the information. But without further ado, I want to bring on my feature guest today, none other than Mr. Jeff Baxter. Jeff, how you doing, man? It's good to see you, brother. You are muted. There, I fixed it for you. Nope, I didn't. There you go.
I got it. Sorry.
There you go.
Double,
doing,
quadruple secret mute. I'm good. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we did a little thing today. Yeah, I don't know.
Nothing
anything
new,
on
really.
Your mind?
Yeah, exactly.
No, we launched the new C series this morning at NetApp, and there's implications that abound around that regarding what the stack looks like now, what your options are as an end user, as a NetApp customer, and even partners have some stuff there. There's a lot of other programs and things that were announced as part of that. So I know there was a lot to cover that we were going to go over today over the course of the next hour. But I wanted to bring some friends along too, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And because they're both people that have presented with us back at Insight, and our show 2 weeks ago also featured this guy. First and foremost, no stranger, friend of the show, Mr. Scott Bell. Scott, how you doing, man?
Doing great, Nick. How are you?
Welcome back. Have you left? You were just here.
I feel like I never leave. It's okay.
Well, you didn't come alone because we brought another friend of the show, one Mr. Chris Lueth. Chris, how you doing, sir?
Oh, doing great, Nick. Love days like today. I live for this stuff, so yeah, doing great, man.
They are exciting days. So I want to go around the horn and give you guys, a minute or two to sort of give your perspective, your opinion on today's launch, if it has any sort of personal implications for you, what parts of it you kind of worked on, or what the big areas were what's your big takeaways? Do you have a pet peeve kind of favorite part of the big launch announcement today? Jeff, let's start with you. What do you got?
So I run the product marketing team here. So I'm, extraordinarily proud of the work my team did and working with the teams that Chris and Scott are on. I'll let them talk about that, but just bringing this exciting launch to market because it's this great combination of three things. One, it's new hardware with, I get to be the first one who says Bezel on this webcast, right? So I beat you to it. Yeah, there you go. You got a bleep button there? That's awesome.
Yeah, I do.
Great. We'll get it ready because this awesome is no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It's so we've got hardware. If you love the on-prem goodies, you can see like a couple bezels up behind me here somewhere, right, hidden back there. So I certainly love the hardware. We've got some cool customer experience programs. We've got stuff we're doing around sustainability. So it's really this comprehensive launch. And I just love the work. I have to give all credit to my team has done on that, and all credit to the product team for developing some amazing offerings. So that's the significance for me.
Nice. Scott, how about yourself?
Oh, Nick, I'm absolutely thrilled to finally bring a product offering to market that not only makes it more attainable, but also it demystifies a few potential misconceptions out in the market of what certain things are. And we'll go into those in detail as Jeff makes the presentation. I won't do any spoilers like he just did.
Nice. I relate a lot to what you just said as well. That was where it really hit home for me. And as I went over in my video this morning, that was the big takeaways for me. Chris, what about you? Not last, but certainly not least. What's some of your big takeaways and thoughts around the launch today?
Well, I've done quite a few platform launches over the decades, and
that's an understatement.
I go get my teeth examined by the dentist twice a year, and for us to get a platform from conception to shipping, usually it was 6 teeth cleanings. Sometimes in a FAS platform, at least 4 teeth cleanings. So the fact that we don't even have 1 teeth cleaning involved with getting the C series out the door. We really lit a fuse and got this thing out very quickly. Very disruptive internally to do something as fast, but nonetheless, it's the right answer. We all know that. That's why we're here. And it isn't something, Jeff Baxter said, guys, we need to come up with a new platform on our own. What do we do? This was based on field feedback. And Nick, I seen your YouTube video. You said as much. This is just us interacting with customers and partners and delivering what was being asked of us. So,
yeah, to go on to finish what you were saying. We heard them. We heard the confusion. We heard the demystifying or the mystification, as Scott put it, especially around the entry level, some of that stuff that went on there. And it kind of just made a lot of sense to sort of build this aligned stack all the way up, where we take away some of the decision factors and make it really about performance and capacity. And that the simplification of that from a decision point and not having 300 different options to choose from is huge. And I'm putting my customer hat on saying that because that's what we used to have to go through, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry for invoking my dental hygiene for folks, but when we've done
that's the weirdest measurement I've ever heard.
I was going to say that's a new unit of measure is the number of teeth cleanings by Chris Lueth.
It's what I do, but when we pre-brief, a few customers and partners about this whole C series, it's this a world of Zoom calls out there, but we've had people stand up and clap. In-person EBCs and on Zoom calls. So this is going to be a fun one to get out the door. So I'll shut up for now and let's get started talking about the new C series.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, I'm going to throw the presentation up and you just kind of start taking us through it. And guys, jump in. If you guys are watching along with us, the chat is open. I will jump in at any opportunity and interrupt and throw your question up on the screen. If you guys are watching in Discord, we're going to keep an eye over there. But if you want to join us on YouTube or Twitch, the links are there in the channel. And that's the way to get your questions on the show here, the easiest way to get them on the show for us. But let's throw this up here real quick. Jeff, I'll hand you the con and kind of take us through what we actually announced today.
When you say that, I have to say I have the con, right? That's the way it works, right? You have the con. I have the con.
Yes.
Okay.
Baxter, you have the con.
Yes, there we go. I have the con, sir. So I agree with you. We're not going to do death by PowerPoint, right? So this is intended to be interactive and really talking about the announcement and providing context around the announcement. So please do questions, do all that other stuff Nick asked you to do. So I will say, just because the lawyers and accountants make me do this, it's not so much that this is confidential, because if it was, I'm putting it on a YouTube live stream and this will be my last live stream. So it's not confidential anymore. We announced it. But because we pre-announced several features of this announcement, it's just a note that, things are subject to change, right? So as we've all known in the technology industry, right, we like to preview our announcements. We're very confident about the announcements, but things are subject to change. So, okay, I've gotten the stuff out of the way that gets me fired if I don't do it. So let's get on to the good stuff. So with this launch, we really were trying to address 2 sort of technical imperatives, or 2 things we're hearing. We're certainly hearing budgets are tightening, right? I don't think that's a surprise to anyone listening to this stream. If you have an IT budget that is increasing, I applaud you. If I do that without hitting my mic. Yeah, exactly. Or wonder what your powerful skills are. But so budgets are tightening, whether it's due to macro or individual things. So we see that. And customers are looking for how can they still keep a lot of the benefits that they have from all flash and from data center modernization, but not break the bank in the process, right?
Yeah.
And the other really big one is that sustainability is becoming the strategic imperative. And what I love about it is it's a confluence of doing what's right for the planet and pure raw greed. And usually when both of those things work together, it's a powerful sort of thing, right? So there's a combination of people actually wanting the planet to be around. I'd like it for it to be around when my kids grow up and grandparents grow up. Yeah, it's generally a good thing, right? So I don't want to kind of hand it off to my kids and say, sorry about that, we're out. It's not a good, it's sorry about the sequels, but the original was great, but so there's that wanting to do good, but then there's also the reality that tied with these lower budgets, energy costs are just getting out of control. And we can talk about that a little bit more, but we hear from customers where just their raw bill coming in from the power company for running their data center is exploding month over month over month, right? And so it takes sustainability from this, we've got to do the right thing to save the planet over the decades, to we've got to do the right thing to be able to pay the data center bill next month, right? It just increases the, there's a lot of psychology. Humans are really bad at thinking about long-term, long-range implications, right? We're not wired for really feeling the impact of something that's going to happen 10 years from now. But we are very wired to stimuli like getting that bill. And so we know those are the two things. Those are what really drove the launch. And so the launch is kind of three parts. One, capacity flash. So that's the geek out section. We'll talk, I think, the most about that. Two, ownership experience, right? So when you get the capacity flash or anything else we have, how can you have the best ownership experience around it? And then what does all that do for sustainability? So I know
the ownership experience is also a very big part of the conversation. There's definitely people that have had a lot of feedback around upgrades, refreshes, availability of software, support entitlements, and all of that stuff. Like that's a big conversation. It's one of the reasons I left it out of my kind of core video that went out today. Is that's a whole different conversation to have on its own. But I think there's some great enhancements. I'm excited that we're making moves. So small moves, small steps, but there's a bigger plan.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really we've had this ownership experience, and I'll preview a little bit there. We've had this great ownership experience with NetApp Keystone, right, where you basically get the entire life cycle of your service taken care of. But that's a storage as a service offering, right? So I want this class of service, I want this many IOPS per terabyte, I'm going to subscribe to it. I don't really care what hardware ends up in my data center to do it. Just provide me with those service levels. And that, I think, is awesome. To be quite frank, that's probably the eventual future for the majority of customers overall, not just NetApp, but overall. But it's definitely not the majority today, and I think it's going to be a long ramp there. And so a lot of customers still want to say, hey, I want an A800, or I want a C400, or I want something like that. I want the specific gear. I want to buy it. I want to take title to it. I want to put an asset sticker on it and put it in my data center. But then I still want all the storage lifecycle benefits. I still want to stay up to date, right? So this new program we're going to be announcing is kind of the cousin to Keystone. It's I still want to buy my gear, CapEx all the way, right? But then I want it to stay current forever. And so that's kind of the pairing that we brought together.
Nice. Any particular ways we're going about that we can share today?
Yeah, sure. So we're doing something we call NetApp Advance. And so we're skipping ahead a little bit, but NetApp Advance is our new ownership program that brings the storage lifecycle program to life, where basically once you buy and subscribe to the storage lifecycle program, you're set for life, right? As long as you continue subscribing to it, you get new controller refreshes, you always get the new technology in, you get support assisted upgrades, so you always get the goodness of these new ONTAP releases that tend to come out every 6 months. You have some cool features like as you're expanding capacity, we don't want you to have to rebuy the same capacity twice. So as you're expanding your capacity and you say, look, I had these 3 terabyte size drives running around, now I'm going to 15.3 terabyte drives. I want to just, as I'm adding these new drives in, I just want to consolidate my stack down, get a 4x density difference, and keep everything common and get newer drives. We'll give you credit back for the drives you bought earlier under the storage lifecycle program, right? And allow you to apply it to that purchase. The lawyers right now are screaming in my ear saying terms and conditions will apply, right? But there's some terms around it. Yeah, asterisk. But it's generally a way that people can keep expanding and keep their hardware always fresh by doing this storage lifecycle program. And there's no secret to it, right? If we look behind the covers, it's just like any of those sort of iPhone upgrade plans, right? You are paying a fee. There is a price for the storage lifecycle program. There's no There's not a free lunch in this world, but the idea is it normalizes the cost across the price of your entire subscription. So you don't have these huge CapEx bumps. You just continue to pay this common amount. Sometimes, depending upon individual customers, it's a different color of money. It's OpEx instead of CapEx if it's seen as part of an ongoing subscription. And then you just get your latest plan. So it's for a lot of people. There's people who say, I'm going to spend $1,000 every couple of years to buy a new iPhone. There's other people who say, I'm going to subscribe to that iPhone plan and I'll pay a little bit more each month, but then every couple of years I get a new free iPhone and I don't have to dig around in the couch cushions for $1,000, right?
Totally.
Similar, just on a much bigger scale, obviously, with the price of storage controllers. But we're doing the same exact thing here and allowing people to have all those benefits. The other key thing, and let's be honest, there's some programs like that out in the market. I gave the iPhone example. There's some programs from competitors that do similar things. The advantage that NetApp really brings to the market is what we do with the cloud. No one else has what we have on the cloud. And so it is an option, and I fully emphasize option. You can stay on-prem forever, ride or die. No problems with that. Just keep refreshing the storage controller. But say you buy 10 storage controllers for your on-prem estate, and 3 years from now you've moved 30% of your estate to the cloud. Well, you don't need to refresh all 10 of those controllers, right? So refresh 7 of the controllers and use the credits from the other 3 to buy NetApp cloud services. So you're not, see, it's kind of like, why buy into the subscription and pay up front when I get to the end of the time and I realize I don't need as much gear as I started with because I moved to the cloud. I will literally have paid NetApp money that I have then lost, right? And while I'm sure that'd be awesome for our balance sheets, it's not awesome for our customers, right? So we want to let them use those credits on the cloud services that they're migrating to. And it's just, and so everything, the goal is, everything, we have this digital wallet in Blue XP, we have all these other services, just add, and I'm generalizing, so don't take this as the specifics of the mechanics, but just add those credits into the digital wallet, and then you can use them for all these different cloud services that NetApp provides.
I want to do a quick recap because what you just said is so important and so foundational. Guys, you can actually take and trade in and upgrade and do all kinds of stuff and get credit back towards additional, not only gear, but services. Whether those are cloud services or in the cloud, and he's skipping ahead to the slide that I'm probably talking about right now, but there are options for you to shuffle around your spend and kind of add and subtract and, level set whatever makes sense for you in an ongoing way. So what you're spending today and what you're spending it on may change a year from now, 2 years, 5 years from now, but just know that the investment isn't wasted. It's not like virtualization where we threw all of the servers away when we virtualized everything, right? It's not exactly. All that stuff isn't getting, you'll get something back out of that. So yeah, I love this. I think it's the right way. It's got a bit of a customer obsession to it that I love. That's the approach to it. It's not as much about us making money as it is about the customers having a good experience, not only buying but using in an ongoing way NetApp's products and services.
Absolutely. So what do you want? You want to talk about the new boxes and the bezels for a little bit? What do you want to do, Nick? It's your show.
I was trying to hang people out so they stick around till the end.
You're showing off the bezels at the very end?
No, okay. I'm not going to make people wait till the end. We brought the 2 gear heads for a reason. Let's talk about some gear.
Okay.
I feel like we could spend an hour talking about Advance and the programs and stuff like that, but today is a hardware geek out. And guys, I didn't do a good job introducing him, but don't let that VP title mess with you. Jeff's one of the most technical people. He can rattle off model numbers of interface cards for various systems. So that's because I send chat messages to Chris and Scott going, "What's the interface number of this card?" And then I say it and take credit for it. That's what the VP title is for. Yeah.
But,
yeah.
No. I've been here 15 years, right? So I started as an SE. So I joke I can still set up an AFF as long as Chris gives me the box and the cables.
Right.
I can
and tells you what commands to type in.
Yes. You don't need to type in commands. Haven't you experienced our new intuitive setup process?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So no, it's So, but I still love playing with the gear, right?
Yeah.
I don't have a rack in the back of my office here anymore, but that's because I can do it. Yeah, who would have that, right? But that's mostly because of the power bills, right? So
I don't want to move that.
You don't want to move it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so let's talk about capacity flash. So capacity flash, setting the stage. There's this gulf between hybrid flash and performance flash. And neither of those are going away, right? So there's the interesting thing is we know there's plenty of applications who are thirsty for sub-millisecond latency. With the AFF A series, we often get sub 500 microsecond or even less out of an AFF A series. And then FAS, especially the capacity side of FAS, so the 7.2K spinning disks, which continue to get bigger, continue to get cheaper. Everyone keeps saying disk is dead, disk is dead. Typically, the people who say disk is dead are the people who can't sell you disk. So it's a pretty darn self-serving statement, quite frankly.
I've got several, I'll leave their names out, storage appliances over here that I just put 14 terabyte drives in, and I'm already running more. I need more space.
Yeah,
disks are not
exactly.
dead.
So disks aren't dead. They're part of a healthy, balanced breakfast. Don't eat those, Chris. Then you'll need the dental appointments more often. But they're part of this whole balance where you can use them for long-term cold archival storage or tiering or different things like that. So they're going to continue to be around. But from a performance standpoint, performance hard drives, the SAS-based 10K drives are generally end of the road in terms of development. They've kind of capped out at 1.8 terabytes. They've capped out in terms of their performance, but yet the cost delta hasn't quite hit the middle. So this middle is this capacity flash, right? So capacity flash, we say capacity flash instead of just saying QLC. People are going to treat them as synonymous, right? People are going to talk about these new things as QLC arrays. We always talk about them in the marketing realm as capacity flash arrays. That's not because we're afraid of saying they're QLC. They are all QLC arrays. It's because we don't want it to be dated when a couple of years from now PLC is out, right? And there'll be more things past that. So is that
Let me ask the panel here one question.
Pentalayer cell.
For those that aren't in the know, when you say QLC or capacity flash, Scott, what does that actually mean? For folks that aren't super savvy with systems and things like that, why does there need to be that distinction between the two?
To have a capacity flash? Well, what that means is exactly what Jeff was saying. We are looking at that target better than HDD latency, but not quite as good as top tier cellular latency, which is sub-millisecond. We're looking at that grace period of 2 to 4 at that point in time. But capacity flash is really just it's more of a bucket term rather than saying and growing stagnant, hey, we just standardized on TLC. Well, guess what? QLC just came out. Oh, now we standardized on QLC. Well, guess what? PLC just came out. It's a way that encompasses not only the larger scale SSDs that are coming, and we expect to grow even more so. In fact, we're already talking about going beyond the 30 terabyte drives that are available. So that's just that's an easier way to categorize it for the purposes of discussion. Then you're just talking about capacity points rather than what's under the hood. Although if you want to talk about what's under the hood, we can certainly
do. I want to talk about what's under the hood. Like, let's geek out.
Definition-wise, just for everyone, right? When we started with all flash, it was SLC, single layer cell, right? Yeah. So I'm not qualified to go into the details of it, but just think of a single layer of NAND basically laid out. Then it went to wafers. Yeah, exactly. So, and then it went to MLC. People often said eMLC for enterprise, which is multi-layer cell, which was someone thinking that they'd be optimistic and just all multi-layer cells would be called MLC, but that only lasted for a while. And then we went TLC, which was triple layer cell, right? And now QLC is quad layer cell, so 4 layers, and then PLC is pentalayer cell, 5 layers, and so on and so forth. I think the key distinction is for us, and to be quite frank, for just about the entire industry, the move from SLC to eMLC to TLC was roughly seamless, right? The latency was still sub-millisecond. Garbage collection, all that other stuff was pretty common, right? And we could just move with it. And we didn't really need to change the performance benchmarks. QLC has been different. QLC has gotten to a certain density point where it's getting very difficult, if not impossible, to maintain sub-millisecond latency, all the high-end performance, all the garbage collection, everything you need to do, even with all of the advanced capabilities of ONTAP, and get to that sub-millisecond latency point. It's just literally so much capacity on the drive through so many layers that it's just impossible to do for just about anyone in the storage industry. So it reaches a point of divergence where QLC isn't just going to supplant TLC. In fact, if you look at the industry-wide shipments, a lot of people did the same sort of path that they had done for previous where, SLC drops off as MLC takes over, MLC drops off as TLC takes over, and they projected the same curve for QLC. And then QLC shipments actually came out and then sort of stagnated for a little while because they didn't just replace TLC and people didn't know, what do we do with this stuff, right? It wasn't just a natural replacement. Well, what we do with this stuff is realize there's a whole new middle band, right? And that's really what we're showing here is there is a new price point between hybrid flash and performance flash, and that's where QLC fits in perfectly.
Now, as we continue to grow the number of wafers that we stack, and we get into penta, and I think Sebastian even brought it up. Do we get into hexa level cell beyond that?
You should go trademark that right now, Sebastian.
Yeah. When we do capacity flash, does it age? So do we move the previous generation into capacity when there's a bigger, better, stronger, faster generation that comes out?
So just a point of clarification there, Nick, is that it's not layer cells, it's level cells, because it's the number of bits that are entered into the level on the substrate. When you start about multi-layer flash, you're talking about 3D NAND, where they do have layers of substrate on top of each other on each of the NAND chips. So really, it's commonly referred to as single layer cell, multi-layer cell, as Jeff already talked about, but really it's single level, multi-level, triple level, because you're talking about one thin layer of substrate and the number of bits that can be stored during program array cycles on that substrate.
Gotcha.
Very cool.
This is
I've
why
been
we bring you to the
educated.
show, Scott.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hearing you mention that, Scott, I'm thinking how wonderful it'd be if you would carve out some time to do an SC presentation that digs into the technical details of Flash. You think you could take that on?
It's funny you mentioned that, Chris, and thanks for bringing that up. Where there actually is out on Field Portal, for those of you who have access to it, a Flash Memory SE presentation that outlines the differences between SLC, MLC, TLC, QLC. PLC is just now entering the market. It's got an honorable mention, but it hasn't seen wide adoption just yet. But we project that within the next 2 to 3 years that it probably will see some significant adoption.
Right.
I
High
predict
five, Scott.
that is a future episode of NetApp ONAIR as well.
Sounds like nice segue, Chris. That was well done. So,
Bravo.
Which level is this? I'm still trying to figure out if this is PLC or I don't know. I'll get it eventually.
That looks like 3D NAND, triple
3D NAND. Okay,
triple
gotcha.
level 3D NAND.
It's my fidget cube. The so I think have we teased them enough? Nick, can we show off the pretty product, or do you want to?
Let's geek out on some gear and let's talk
Okay.
about ports and speeds and feeds and all of that stuff, because that's what I want to geek out on today. Oh, it's
There you
sexy,
go.
isn't it?
Yes. The AFF C series. It's more than just a bezel, but this is our new family of all flash, high capacity flash systems. We'll go into technical details on some later slides and let these guys geek out on it. But I will say at a high level, it's an ONTAP based system. So everything our audience here is familiar with ONTAP, and hopefully you are. If you aren't, we'll get you familiar. So efficiency, scalability. Will it have blue LEDs to go with blue XP? Hold that thought for a second. It's got some LEDs in there. Yeah. So oh hell, I'll just answer the question. The bezel does have the capability to light up. Right now, our existing platforms don't have the ability to power that light up bezel without, running a cable around the back of the unit or something silly like that. There's no real good way to do it. But we did make the bezel sort of future proof so that if a theoretical platform came out in the theoretical future, and I'm not talking any time particularly short range, we could add the capability to power that bezel out the front and then light it up. So we future proof them so that at some point they might be able to glow with the cheery NetApp logo. I'm trying to talk engineering into making it like a hue light so I can change the colors to match blue XP, but I don't think that's going to fly. I don't think they're going to agree to that, but
we've had addressable RGB in the consumer side of the market for 10 years.
I know exactly.
Look at this monster beside me. It's covered in, there's so much RGB in there. It's crazy.
So just so folks know, we desperately look for a way to light up something on the front of the bezel. Jeff Baxter's been hounding me about this for
15 years.
Over half of my NetApp career.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while.
That's like
Let's
30
leave it
teeth
at that.
cleanings. 30 teeth cleanings at least.
Yeah. We even looked at putting a little wind turbine behind the bezel that the incoming cooling air would spin fast enough to light up. We sanctioned the
Wow.
university.
I hadn't heard
to
that one.
Study
That's
this,
awesome.
and the problem is, if data centers ran at 35 degrees C, no problem. You'd need sunglasses, but most data centers are under 25 C, and it just didn't spin the blades fast enough. So we've been wanting to get this thing to light up for a long time.
That's hilarious.
Watch that
Okay.
space.
Yeah, so watch that space. So the efficient, secure, scalable. We'll talk about all these in more detail. So this is I'll leave the geek up slide here and let our product team extraordinaire talk to it. But there's 3 boxes here: the A250, the AFF C250, C400, and C800. When you've spent the last 3 years saying A, it takes a second. But yeah, I saw this in the chat briefly. C does stand for capacity, right? And for those of you asking as a preview, hey, what happens to the C190? Stick around for a slide or two. We'll get there.
Yep.
But these are the new C series boxes, and you'll notice that the model numbers match the AFF A series. There's no mystery to that, right? They're essentially the same chassis, a lot of the same platform, a lot of the same expandability on the back, minus the SAS ports, because that wouldn't make sense because all the QLC drives are NVMe drives. But they're similar boxes, and so we wanted to keep the same range so that you got the same sense in your head. If you're familiar with our 250, 400, 800, that knowledge transfers effectively. But they're all QLC, and so they have different performance characteristics and different capacity characteristics. I'll turn it over to Scott or Chris if they want to talk about it.
Yeah. What is the difference in let's start at the beginning, like the A250 versus the C250. Like fundamentally, what do people need to know the difference is?
Fundamentally, hardware-wise, it's the same. It is the same box with different media underneath of it.
Okay.
However, because like we said, we're talking about different levels of cellular endurance, that latency is not in the sub 1 millisecond anymore. It's in the 2 to 4. So you're going to see some latency differences between it and, say, an A250, even with similar capacity drives.
And is that to do with NVMe, or is that to do with what specifically?
Well, that's an all NVMe platform. In fact, all 3 of those systems will support NVMe drives. The AFF C250 does have exclusively NVMe drives, but they yes.
Well, they all have the capacity flash drives, QLC based drives. They're gonna, just like Scott mentioned, they're gonna look pretty darn familiar to their A series counterparts. The big difference is going to be you don't have the option for SAS attached SSDs. Don't go there. Or even just regular TLC attached NVMe SSDs. So it's going to be QLC only. They will attach via NVMe. As Scott mentioned, QLC's drives, they do offer a little cost point. I can't. Jeff will start making mean eyes at me, so I'm not going to go any further than that.
Be prepared to mute him, Nick.
But there's trade-offs, right? So for a little cost, the drives don't have the endurance of TLC. Yeah. Now, why are we released the FAS 500F a few years ago with QLC? It's kind of like a learning experience for us. We did our own internal testing of field-based systems with specifically 15.3 terabyte TLC drives, and we modeled the workload patterns that we've seen. And we knew when we launched the QLC drives that we expected like a 7-year life cycle for durability of writes. And based on what we're seeing in the field, that has been borne out, if not higher. So our confidence is going up our confidence level is going up in the ability of QLC to withstand workloads over time. And if you remember, when we launched the FAS 500F, we positioned it as a tier 2, type of storage system, and coming out
as if it was somehow inferior to the A250, and I never understood that myself.
Well, as it turns out, oh, Nick, you robbed my thought. Don't you shake your head?
It's good to be the host.
But as we found out, we're comfortable positioning the C series for not just tier 2 anymore, but actually tier 1 workloads.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is so with the A series, the C series, and traditional FAS systems in mind, how do we position the bigger picture at this point for what should be used where? And I know that's an it depends AF questions. But I guess in general, how do we see this playing out for a typical customer that might use one of each?
Is that a marketing kind of topic, Jeff?
I think it's a Jeff question.
You can talk
there.
to it. No, I mean,
Yeah.
it was Scott or Chris. We can
Jeff's
all talk
got
to it.
There's certainly a
threw up a
marketing
slide.
perspective to that, but I'd love to hear like the end user sort of
Yeah.
perspective when it comes down to like what's a smart decision for people to make.
So I'll do the high level marketing thing, and then I'll let the smart guys go into it in more detail. This is the slide where we kind of talk about the target use cases for the C series, right? And I think the key thing for the C series is people are going to naturally want to say, okay, tier 2 workloads. And that's exactly right, but it's not exclusively tier 2 workloads, right? So test dev, fast recovery for backups, obviously going to just excel at all those tier 2 workloads. So that's pretty much a no-brainer. If there's any sort of performance requirement to it, but it doesn't require, ultra low latency, then bam, it's a C series. I think that's pretty much a no-brainer. Where it gets a little more and same thing on this left. So that's the right-hand side. Same thing on the left-hand side. As I mentioned, NetApp's going to continue selling disk, especially a 7.2K capacity disk. We'll continue, with the 10K, if and where it makes sense, but it really doesn't technically moving forward, right? So I don't expect that there'll be any.
At a certain point, it makes more sense to just get the capacity flash system instead of the 10K 2.5 SAS, right?
I think it's very rare to say something would be a mistake technically, so I don't want to say that, but I'd say I'd really look sideways at someone refreshing to another sort of performance hard drive layer. It just doesn't make sense when you look at the roadmap and everything like that. So I mean, we'll work through all the options with customers because we're not trying to push one thing over another. But it's just when you look at the TCO and the speed and the future proofing and everything, capacity flash is the perfect refresh. So I think the right hand side and the left hand side here are kind of no brainers. When we get into tier 1 workloads, that's where I think there's a little bit more of a gray area, and I'll let Scott and Chris maybe if they want to talk a little bit about how we think about those.
Yep.
Sure. So in that regard, you are looking at high demand, but not as high demand as, say, your high-end databases or your high-end AI analytics, where actually doing the number crunching. Here, you are still going to use that, but what we classify as tier 0 workloads, this is not the box for you. But you want to have better latency, as you did, than say your 10K storage that we're serving up your files, or your SMB or NFS shares, your user home directories, anything that's just like, hey, it's just there and we access it from time to time. You're going to see a dramatic improvement, and especially a lower total cost of ownership, that Jeff had mentioned, not only because you'll be able to consolidate all those drives down to, say, one shelf or even half a shelf of drives. You will also gain the ability to say, I just retired 12 shelves of these old spinners and I went down to one shelf. Think about what that does to your rack density, your power consumption, how many outlets you're recovering, and
not to mention the heat that you save going to flash from
thermal
spinning
dissipation.
Like,
absolutely.
Thermals in data centers are everything, right?
Yep.
Especially now. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm a firm believer in a poor excuse is better than no excuse. And one of the things we still have to work on, Scott and I, in tandem with our engineering team, is this C series concept went from, yeah, it's a good idea, let's see if we can make it happen, to us being in this meeting today in a short number of weeks. Jeff, like 10 weeks, 11 weeks.
Yeah.
So what that means is, instead of like the multiple teeth cleaning life cycles getting a platform out the door, we didn't have time to do that full sort of payload that Scott and I normally provide, the tech fact, the SE Prezo with ad nauseum number of details in it. So we still have to work on the mapping. So, like what's a good use case, what is going to be better served on TLC, or even, when NLSAS makes the biggest impact. But coming back to, the leftmost box, going from hybrid FAS to flash media, or in general, just storage consolidation is a better word to use. My first high-end platform that I launched was in 2006, the FAS 8030 and 6030 and 6070. And we did all of our upgrade mappings. You know, it made sense for the 980 to upgrade. Yes. Some of the mid-range systems. Yes. But what we seen was a rush of people wanting to upgrade their FAS 250s and FAS 270s to a high-end system. Now, I admit I'm open to that type of possibility, but it turns out over the years, this has been very popular. Consolidate a bunch of different platforms onto like one more capable platform. And it's kind of what's the logic behind the box on the left here. And it's not just limited to 10K SAS drives, right? There's tremendous support systems out there. So that's another thing we have to map, not just workload to QLC goodness, but also some of the upgrade scenarios that we think are going to be an outstanding story to help you solve customer problems.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a need out there for the cheap and deep, the 7,200 RPM, the big 3.5s, especially as capacities skyrocket. Like we see Western Digital and Seagate already exceeding 20 terabytes. 30 terabytes is right around the corner. I could see a time 2 years, 5 years from now where we're talking in excess of 50 terabytes. Like I don't know where physics kind of punch us in the mouth, but we haven't found it yet. And that's the beauty of what the drive manufacturers are pulling off. Darth brought up something that I wanted to kind of lead into here. It seems like there should be a point where a spinning disk is phased out. That's where I was going with that. I think there's always going to be a need for cheap and deep kind of big 3.5s for long-term archival and things like that, or just things that have no performance implications needed whatsoever. But going back to what Jeff said originally, I do think there's a point where you're refreshing, where instead of buying another shelf of 2.5-inch 10K SAS spinning disks, that alternatively you look at QLC capacity flash as to do the same job to get more performance, lower heat, lower thermals, lower power consumption, all of that kind of stuff. The math just works, and it makes more sense.
I think, I never count solid state out, right? I've been reading articles about solid state batteries and everything, replacing lithium ion and stuff like that. And certainly what we've seen on storage is impressive. So, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, would I bet against solid state overcoming, magnetic or something like that? And then yeah, maybe. But it's definitely not any time in our short-term roadmap to consider. And let's hypothetically say at some point solid state completely wipes out spinning drives, right? It's better on all axes. At that point, maybe we're talking about DNA or some other sort of long-term capacity storage that has horrific latency but absurd capacities, right? So I think there's probably always going to be some sort of successor in you can store a ton of data here, but geez, don't ever try and get it back at any reasonable time frame. There will probably be something along those lines, right? The cloud version of it is something like, the Glacier deep storage is on AWS or something. It just feels like, and this is just a gut feel, that even if we go 30, 40 years out, and who knows, right, that there'll be something, that there will still be this differentiation in different types of storage.
Well, Microsoft's figured out how to store data on glass. So
exactly.
Whatever that program's called, I can't remember. So who knows what
it feels like the laws of physics don't like a free lunch, right? So there's always going to be a way to store something, a lot more of something in something, but the bandwidth to get it in and out is going to be by definition restricted, right? It's almost to
invoke Goldblum, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
You're absolutely right.
And everything has consequences, right? So
yeah, exactly.
I think we're looking at some of the consequences of doing disks is that I don't know that anybody anticipated the absolute explosion of data that's happened over the last 20 something years, going back to 1 terabyte drives at the turn of the millennium. So now we're looking at 20 to 30 terabyte drives just in that number of years. So in another 20 years, are we talking about 40 to 50 terabyte drives, or is that kind of a hockey stick and it's just going to go up to 100 terabyte drives before we even know what hit us? So yeah, I definitely think that. I want to do a quick little aside here. I'm going to pull the Prezo off so we can kind of full screen and see this real quick. This is an excellent question, and I think it's a bigger talking point. Why call the C-Series capacity when the A-Series can offer more capacity? For instance, the A400 lists max effective capacity at 717 petabytes versus a C400 that has a max effective capacity of 70 petabytes. Is there a misunderstanding there, or is Arthur right in his question here?
In the most literal sense, he's correct. But remember what we were saying earlier, we're talking about capacity flash.
Yeah.
Capacity optimized on flash. It's not about raw capacity or usable capacity. It's about this is the type of flash media that we're telling the story with this array. It's about better than 10K SAS latency, not quite sub 1 millisecond, but still able to support your tier 1 workloads.
Yeah, and if if we wanted to game the system, we could support the same number of drives behind the C400 as the A400, and get to equivalency with the NVMe attached SSDs. But based on sales data, based on ASUP data, how many customers deploy more than say 48 drives on a mid-range system? Pretty select. You can take row count on probably one hand, maybe two. So this is, if we go through all the development work and testing work to support 480 spindles on the C400 like we do on the A400, what's the ROI? And there's not much there. We're open to it, mind you. We keep an eye on trends, but right now we just felt good capping the C400 at 96 SSDs.
So is that a situation where you anticipate people offloading that onto an archival system, a more traditional FAS with some 3.5s, big shelves, and instead of keeping it around on the capacity flash?
Yeah, sure. Tier off stale data to the cloud, for instance, or if you strictly need to be on-prem, tier it off to a storage grid. Or
there you go.
We support S3 on FAS systems as well. So yeah, put it where it makes the most economic sense for you.
Cool. Scott, anything else you want to add there?
No, I think he hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah, you nailed it. Cool. Thank you for the question, Arthur. That's a good one. All right, so we've gone through the C-Series systems.
Yep.
I know we're getting a little tight on time here. I definitely want to talk about the other system that was announced before we get out of here, because that was
Sure. So I'll
there
kinda
were
skip
several
through some of
questions around the C190, and I kind of want to address the changeover and path forward as far as people go for the C190.
Yep. And I do know on Discord, I noticed that there's an over-under on the number of times we say Bezel on this. So I just want to say Bezel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
there we go.
I'll
That
point
should
out-
really screw up Spencer. Yeah.
I'll point out that what we're looking at, the lighter color is going to be the AFF Bezel palette. The FAS ones will be a little bit darker, like a charcoal gray. So Bezel gets thrown up again and again.
Yeah. So kind of to where Nick was segueing to, we did have the C190 product in market. We do have the C190 product in market, and that C stood for, depending on who you asked, either commercial or channel, right? It was intended for small and medium businesses, primarily served through the channel. It's been a great product for us, but there were some concerns about some of the limitations with it. And then certainly when us marketing geniuses decided to name the AFF a C-Series, we went, that's going to be a problem. As someone just parodied in a skit he posted today, I believe. Thanks, Nick. We'll talk later. But so we decided to solve that with this new AFF A150. So the AFF A150 is similar to a C190, but we didn't want to just slap a new name on it. We could have. But it now aligns. It is TLC-based flash. One of the points we didn't really talk well about the C-Series is the C-Series has, we think, the lowest starting point for QLC-based flash in the market, at least of any enterprise storage competitor. It starts at about 122 terabytes raw, which is 8 15.3 terabyte drives. Correct me, guys, if I got that wrong. I'm doing it from memory. But so that's kind of the lowest you can get before the overhead gets just ridiculous and the performance gets ridiculous and everything like that. And that's because the smallest QLC drives we can use in these systems is 15.3 terabyte drives. So it kind of limits you if that entry point you're talking about, with good storage efficiency and everything, you're talking north of 400 terabytes usable probably, or effective at least. So that's a pretty high entry point. So there's still going to be sort of TLC, because TLC drives can still go down to 960 gig. Will still be more cost effective if you don't need that many terabytes, right? The dollar per terabyte may be a little bit higher, but you're not getting nearly as many terabytes. So we could have just refreshed it, but instead we decided to kind of do a little bit of a performance bump on it. So it's got 20 to 40% higher performance than a C190. And we heard feedback from customers in the field that we had tried to make the C190 really simple. And part of that was just trying to keep it simple for customers. The other part of it was, to be quite honest, when you're doing product differentiation, if you're going to have different lines of products going up at different price points, you can't have too much overlap over them. It's just not good product practice. But we heard that we were a little too severe on that. So we added additional scalability options. You can use now, in addition to the 960 gig drives, you can use the 3.8s and the 7.6s, and you can add 2 SAS expansion shelves. So you get up to 72 SSDs, the 2 24 drive expansion shelves, plus the 24 drives that come internal to it. We also added support for our Metro Cluster technology, specifically the Metro Cluster IP technology. So all in, it's a great.
You can Metro Cluster the A150.
You can Metro Cluster any of our AFF boxes.
Wow. You couldn't, okay.
The one exception was the legacy A200, which isn't offered now. It just didn't have the horsepower to power it.
Yeah. 220 did though.
220 did, and so does the 150.
There you go.
Yeah, and the other limitation that held back the C190 is you need 12 cores per node to make MCC work, and eight cores per node just didn't feed the bulldogs on the C190.
I think Chris just hinted why there's 20 to 40% performance on the A150 versus the C190. For those of you following along at home,
people were hugging onto those 220s over the last 5 years.
Yeah,
those are low key, like sneaky, one of the better boxes that we've dropped.
Yeah, I think the A150 will slot right into that slot, right?
It's going to come right into that.
It's a powerful box. It's a powerful box.
So what Jeff's saying is, if you have an A220 today, you need to be looking at the A150.
Yeah.
Going forward.
The one difference, and it's called out on the slide, but the one thing about the A150 is it is SAS-based SSDs, not NVMe-based SSDs. That's just part of. There's still a little bit of a price differential with using NVMe drives versus SAS drives. And so that's just a part of the game, right? The NVMe drives are the future, and everything will come down in cost over time. But if we're going for the absolute lowest cost all flash system we can offer, that still has all the capabilities, including Metro Cluster, everything like that, then it's SAS drives for right now at this very, very low end of the market, which is fine. The SAS drives work just as fine.
Question from Darth in chat. Are we phasing the C190 out eventually with this sort of as a supersedure of the C190?
Yeah, I mean, we don't pre-announce end of availability, right? But I think anyone can read the tea leaves here. This is designed as a natural successor to the C190, so I think you can expect it to follow the same life cycle we typically have, where we'll run both products in comparison. But since the A150 is a complete superset and improvement of the C190, it's legal won't allow me to say it, but you can make your own predictions. I assume that means the C190 will be phased out.
Yep. Cool. So we went over. So this has all the bells and whistles of the C190, but then there's the expansion. There's the more performance. You get the big 12-core CPU. You're running the latest 9.12, and we're looking at shipping it, into sometime in March. Subject to change, asterisk, all of that good stuff.
Subject to change, asterisk. Yeah, this is a very fast launch and release, but yeah, the goal is that these will all be shipping in March.
And I mean, one of the allures of the C190 was the price point. Are we in the ballpark? Without saying exact numbers, are we in the same ballpark here? Yeah,
it's designed to be a successor of the C190, so asterisk, check with your local partner and everything like that for pricing, but it's designed to be in the same ballpark.
Yeah. There was a question in Discord about where is this one's new bezel?
Bezel. We will. So
I had to get one more in there.
Yeah. So the new bezel, we decided. So full disclosure, the new bezels are going to phase in over the course of this year. We wanted to go ahead and pre-announce them. In fact, and we're saying this on the slides, if you read the fine print, even some of the C series will ship for the first month or two with the older bezel. It's taking a little bit of time to get the newer bezels up and going, but those will phase in starting in June on that, and then we'll phase them across the rest of the product line. What we didn't want to do, and this kind of goes into our sustainability aspect, we had bezels already on pre-order. We have bezels made for systems that were already shipping. We didn't want to throw a bunch of bezels into the landfill. That's the honest answer, right? It's not, from a sustainability practice, it's not a great idea. So we're going to be phasing the new bezels in. We also, with the AFF A series, will be introducing those new light colored bezels into that line as well. But at least for this launch, what we didn't want to do on the web page was show the A150 with a different color bezel than all the other A series and confuse people into thinking it was a C series since we're showing them with the new bezel.
Right.
This is why I get paid the big bucks in product marketing. I don't want to tell you how many Zoom meetings there were about just that. But
Hey,
so that's why it shows the old bezel.
I've been doing the new bezel since 2019. So
Yeah.
welcome to the fun.
Yeah,
There's been more than one Zoom meeting about it.
I'll do real inside baseball. Try sitting on a call with finance trying to justify the ROI of a new bezel. It's like, but it looks cool. And like it's really hard to put it looks cool in dollars and cents. And I'll give you inside baseball. The new bezel, we focused on making it incredibly sustainable using renewable materials. It's actually a little bit cheaper than the current bezel, just a little bit less material. Still does everything we need from a thermal perspective, but so it's better. But there is a startup cost just in terms of tooling and doing some other sort of thing, design work to produce the new bezel. So it's always, in a cost constrained environment, we talked about budgets. It's always an interesting thing to say, hey, we want to spend this X amount of dollars to new bezel. Okay, what's the return on investment? Well, so Nick Howell and I can sit on a webcast and talk about how cool bezels are. That's not like, it doesn't translate into an Excel spreadsheet very well from an ROI, but we did it. So it'll phase in over the course of the next couple of months, and that's why. Long answer to a simple
to that
question.
point. Jason just chimed in and get timely with this weekend being the Super
Yes.
Bowl. It's the same ROI as a Super Bowl commercial, but
Yeah.
that doesn't stop people from spending millions of dollars for 30 seconds.
Yeah, but thankfully a lot cheaper than a Super Bowl commercial. So-
And for those of you who actually have the old bezel, don't feel bad about it. Here's a cool story with me and Dave Hitz from 2017. I happened to have one of these bezels in hand when he walked by the inside booth, and I asked him, I said, if the diamond shape reminded him of anything, and he quoted some obscure artist that I can't possibly remember. I said, okay, but think nerdier than that. He's like, I don't know. I said, doesn't that look like the underside of an Imperial Star Destroyer? And all of a sudden his eyes got as big as dinner plates. He said, that is awesome.
I keep thinking it looks like vaguely like the Klingon symbol, frankly, but kind of like, I don't know. But anyways, yes, no, absolutely. So, and it'll get added into the collection up here at some point.
All right, guys, I want to tie us off here a little bit. Yep. We talked about the new advanced program at the very top. Yep. We have gone over the new C series platforms, and we've gone over the A150. Obviously, we've said bezel, I think, a number of times. Jeff, it looks like your name has even been modified to be Jeff Bezel now. Oh
my God, who did that?
I don't know, but the I just wanted to make sure that we have full picture coverage. Did we miss anything about the big announcement today?
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit. So the NetApp Advance is a combination of the storage lifecycle program and Cloud Advantage, as well as our storage efficiency guarantee. You can expect to see us expand that over time, right? And then I think the other major thing we talked about up front was sustainability. So I'm just going to mention that real quick.
Yeah.
So from a sustainability point of view, right, this is our goal is to contribute to the planet and contribute to everyone's bottom line, right? To help them have their technology impact the environment. So there's a couple of different things we're announcing as part of this announcement. One, and this we'd already pre-announced, Chris and Scott and team have done an amazing job in getting out in front of providing carbon footprint reports for our systems. So these are already out on the website for most systems. I think we're finishing out the portfolio where you can get a carbon footprint report, and you can see right here, I have to squint at it, but so an AFF A250 has a estimated lifetime carbon footprint of 9,960 kilograms of carbon emissions. So we're being very transparent about what we do. Obviously, that's an estimate. There's many things that have to come into account to translate the power usage into a carbon footprint and everything else associated with the life cycle. So we use an MIT open standard called the Product Attribute to Impact Algorithm, or PIA. It's a consortium that we're a part of, and we can use that to go ahead and model out the systems. We're part of that consortium, right, Chris? Or am I misstating that?
We are a contributing member, yes.
Okay, very good. So there's that part of it. The other thing is, and this is a preview, so again, this is subject to change, but just like Keystone today offers a data availability guarantee, Keystone is our storage as a service offering, and it's so reliable that we offer 5 nines data availability standard with that. If we happen to miss it for whatever reason, we offer a service credit back. Now we're going to do the same thing with watts per terabyte. So we're going to say this is how many watts per terabyte each service level is going to apply.
Wow.
Because theoretically, you're not specifying what gear you put on the floor. So we could put some old clunkers on your floor, horribly inefficient gear. Now, we would never do that. That's not the right thing to do by our customers. But under the terms of our contract, all we have to give you is a certain IOPS per terabyte. So we could do that. We could give you massively inefficient gear. So this basically puts into writing, we're not going to do that. We wouldn't do that anyways, but we're not going to do that. And up front, we'll calculate, here's how many watts per terabyte it'll take us to do, and we'll put it on the ground there. And over time, we'll continue to refresh your gear, so we'll stay within that power envelope. And if we don't, we'll remedy it. We'll fix whatever the issue is, and if necessary, we'll offer service credits to make up for that extra power draw.
Question in the chat, just to clarify, we have an SLA for Matt Watts now?
Yes, it's one blog per week, I believe. No,
or we get credit.
Wow.
It's the number of extra U's he adds to a word. So I keep telling him honor and color just don't need the unnecessary U, but and virtualization is spelled with a Z. So, but that's part of all his SLA. He translates it back to the original English language whenever we write something. So
go check out his show, Watts the Future, guys. It's really good.
And I still can't believe we let him use that acronym. I'm so proud. So the other preview, and again, this is a preview. The goal is to bring it out in the middle of this calendar year. When we introduced Blue XP, there was a ransomware dashboard as part of it. And we kind of previewed and we said, hey, stick around. There's going to be more dashboards coming. And this new dashboard is a sustainability dashboard. And the goal in the sustainability dashboard is you can dive into your systems and you can see at a glance a sort of score. And that sustainability score, I want to be clear, is not a third-party validated score. It's not I can compare my environment to someone else's environment. It's more a how am I doing, right? Just like the ransomware protection score is a how am I doing on securing my NetApp environment against ransomware. This is a how am I doing on being as sustainable as I can. And we'll give you, here's your projected usage, power, direct carbon, everything like that. And then we'll give you these ability to fix things. So we'll use our AIOps integrated to help consolidate your capacity. So, one of the interesting things that people point out all the time is if I just tier my cold data off my system, but then I don't do anything, I'm still using the same amount of power to run empty shelves, right? So you can consolidate off of it, you can tier data off, and then we'll help you consolidate onto a lesser number of shelves, and then you can literally turn those shelves off, and that will reduce your power emissions and your carbon emissions by definition, right? So we're going to offer you all of that built into one single sustainability dashboard that you can look at and take direct action to improve your sustainability program.
Ooh, Jeff, can I steal a few seconds here?
Hey,
go. Cool. So yeah, when you see the real-time power consumption and carbon footprint, that is really coming from the customer system. We're not wetting a finger, putting it in there and guesstimating. That is actually going to be for a per customer metric. So how do you calculate the CO2 being emitted? Well, it varies by country, right? It varies. Europe's better than the U.S. U.S. is better than China. But even across Europe, different countries have greener power than another country. So we're actually going to plug back into that PIA algorithm engine. We're going to pass it along the metrics, power consumption, for instance, and look and see what country that system's in and give you a very accurate indicator of that system's CO2 footprint. So to TMI, you can tell I'm excited about this.
It's very cool.
I mean, very cool.
The amount of effort, I'll kind of close up here on the sustainability talk. Whoa, I just full screen my screen. There we go. I'm on the wrong screen. A cool thing that Chris and Scott have really spearheaded is putting these titanium power supplies into our systems. We've started to ship that to the EU.
Titanium rated. We're not making power supplies out of titanium, are we?
No.
Okay.
Just
titanium
for you,
rated.
Yeah, we gold plate your power supplies, Nick. But no. So these are titanium rated power supplies, more efficient.
No? Okay.
Yeah, the power supplies now come with lighted bezels. That's the next innovation. So,
well, we had one come up that the new bezels have solar panels in them for sustainability, right? Yeah.
That's I could confirm that's true, but then I'd get fired because it isn't. Yeah. So, but so I'll just leave this up here for a second. People can see this is just one simple innovation we're doing at no additional cost to customers to make their systems more efficient, and we're doing it more than a year in advance of the EU guidelines, and we'll continue to roll that out across the world. And so I'll kind of summarize here, right? Our goal is to kind of reinvent storage, make it as sustainability as important as capacity and performance. And some of the work Chris has been doing, Scott, Matt Watts, many other people across our organization has been driving sustainability from being a hobby and kind of a really nice side effect to being a fundamental design principle for our products, and really elevating it in the discussion. And it's still early days for doing that, but it's dramatic for me just in the last 6 months how much we've transformed internally.
Yeah, I wanted to throw this up here because I had exactly the same thought. I think that there is a real potential in the future that we could start automating the powering on up and down of gear and expansion shelves and things like that based on demand, based on, I don't want to compare it directly to a glacier infrequent sort of thing, but there is a way where you could get like tier 3 cheap and deep storage that powered off. I know that when I was running systems 15 years ago, we had an archive, a SnapLock archive I worked in public healthcare, so we had to keep stuff around for 10 years. But I turned that system off. I turned it on once a month, lit up all the shelves, let SnapMirror sync, let all the systems update everything, and once it was done, it powered itself back off because we didn't want to pay the power bill to run, basically a full rack of shelves and controllers. So I do think there is a way that we could automate that in the future. Some of the stuff Chris was referring to a few minutes ago, where we're doing those measurements discreetly across different things using that algorithm from MIT, but using that to then trigger an action that brings that something down, or at least sends an alert, lets you know, hey, you can turn this thing off if you want to.
Yeah. So the scorecard that Jeff showed in the earlier slide will be our first iteration in that goal, Nick, where we'll make recommendations of you can't just tear off to the cloud and magically lower your power bill. You also have to, free up that storage space and then power it off, get rid of it. So so we want to have a guided pathway to lower your power consumption. Internally, we have engineering. I don't want to call it skunk works, but we do hackathons where engineers try to solve customer problems. We actually have a hackathon going now for sustainability. What can we do to lower the power consumption of a given system, especially if it's idle? So,
yeah, there is a small battalion of people inside of NetApp guys working on sustainability. It's not something that's just a fad or a hobby, like you said earlier, Jeff. There's something that is, it's something we're taking very seriously. It's something that is going into the design of any future systems at this point. So I know several of my team are working on it. So the hardware team, obviously, engineering is all over it. So, and Matt putting the content out there for sure. I love that. That's a thing that we've got going on. Well, guys, we're overtime, but this is anything else we want to sneak in here before we get out of here? Any last thoughts, closing thoughts around the horn?
I haven't talked enough.
I want to get one last word in. Bezel.
Yep.
I was just about to say that.
Scott Bezel actually works. We need to change your name to
Scott Bezel.
We're going to have you legally change
Bezel.
your name.
Bezel.
No, I guess last word is I'm super excited. This is we launch a new family of appliances once a decade, if that, right? There's been FAS since the beginning, right? And then AFF is now
2012
10 years old, guys.
2015.
2015, we brought out the 8,000 series.
So kind of the A series is then, and now the C series. So this is pretty monumental for us, and it's kind of like, just like we were talking about sustainability. It's promoting QLC from being an interesting point. I've seen some stories out there here today saying NetApp's first QLC system, and I'm like, the poor FAS 500F, right? But so it's kind of promoting QLC from being this. I don't want to call the FAS 500F a hobby because it's been an amazing system and it's helped us learn a lot, right? But it was our entry point into the space, and it's now promoted to being a full member of the family, right? So that's the monumental thing for me. Just like that's kind of the theme here. We've had some other things like a free controller upgrade program in the past. Well, okay, that was kind of an entry into the space. It was kind of a hobby way of doing it. NetApp Advance is taking it and making it a true part of our family, side by side with NetApp Keystone. And sustainability, again, is going from kind of being this thing we do on the sides to being this core part of the NetApp identity. So in a lot of ways, and I wish I'd thought about this when writing up my blog, in a lot of ways, the theme of this launch is taking things that we had just started to explore and really bringing them to prominence as a mainstream sort of part of NetApp moving forward.
Yeah. I love that. Scott, how about you? Closing thoughts? Any final words?
I already said my final words, but thank you very much for putting this together. I had a lot of fun.
Well, thanks for being here. Chris, I'll give you the last word. What do you say, man?
Well, I have to express our appreciation, one, for coming to the session, but also the feedback loop that we get from some of our most important stakeholders. I can't see, you're not on camera, but your feedback had a huge part in what we talked about today. So thank you for that feedback. Keep it coming, because we're listening.
Yeah. Jason threw some kudos in here at the end. He wasn't the only one. There were some thanks for the answers to the questions in the chat. Really well packaged launch. Jeff, shout out to your entire team, your greater team and the rest of everybody at NetApp that was a part of it. I mean, this has gone over extremely well for the short period of time that you guys mentioned that it's all been put together in. I know I was editing all weekend and making graphics, so it was really there was some last minute stuff that was put together. But a big shout out to you guys. Excellent launch. The bezels look amazing. I got to sneak another bezel in there. I expect one for my. I guess I have to call it a C250 now. At some point in the near future, so I can show it off in videos going forward.
I've gotten literally 15 messages this morning going, "Send me a bezel." Like from just
you too?
Inside NetApp, outside. Yeah, you too. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's we should start charging for these things, Chris. I mean, if it wouldn't get me fired, I could make an extra side income off that. Off bezel trading.
It did come up in Discord chat. We could actually drop STL patterns and let people just 3D print them on their own.
But there's metal. If it wouldn't be for the EMI part, so they have.
Does the data center light on fire? Well, someone printed their own bezel.
my hair stands up on end. Well, I don't have.
Yeah, exactly.
When I walk by yours,
that would be
slightly
a bad
violates
image.
the thermal. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that would be a bad image. Say, well, what's the course of this fire? This melted bezel right here.
This melted bezel.
Yeah. When we started talking about lighting up the logo on the front of the bezel, one of the things, engineers like to maybe overthink things, but one of the ideas came up is make it motion activated for sustainability. So it wouldn't light up until you walked up in close proximity.
So if you have a modern car and you walk up to it, either with Tesla, like my Nissan SUV does it from 2017. Like I walk up and the lights under the mirrors and the door handles light up, and that's good. I like that.
It was nip and tuck, but I said, no, let's get the bezel out. We can make that phase 2.
Yeah. Well, let's get the bezels first, and then we can put some lights on it. But yeah, it would be cool if we had some RGB ports on the boards inside of the storage arrays. I mean, for future things, the 3-pin pinout for addressable RGB,
right?
Then we can go nuts, right?
I love that we're going to do a report on this. And it's like we delivered all this amazing customer value, and you guys spent 60% of the time talking about bezels.
Yes.
Yes, we did.
That's what we do. We geek out on
That's
that.
what we do.
Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. To everybody watching and listening along, thank you for being with us. Thank you for all the questions in the chat. It was very lively today. I really appreciate that. Shout out to everybody in Discord. If you're not in Discord and you're watching this, make sure you head over to discord.gg/NetApp. Get in there. Come join the community. We have a lot of fun in there. Guys, thank you for joining me. I'm going to say a few final words and let you guys go. But for Scott Bell, for Chris Lueth, for Jeff Baxter, I'm Nick Howell. Thank you guys for joining us. And yes, get into Discord, like the videos, do all that good stuff. The replay will be up on demand as soon as this stream is over, so you can share it out there. If you missed a certain portion of it, had to step away, whatever reason, it will be there for you as well.